Why bad things happen to good people. Buddhist answer to life's unfairness. Maybe you've known this feeling. You're sitting beside someone you love, someone who's lived their whole life with kindness, never asking much for themselves. Or you hear that a gentle friend, a good neighbor, has suddenly fallen ill. And as the weight of sorrow settles in, another feeling quietly rises. Not just grief, but a question. A quiet ache in the heart. Why? Why them? What did they do to deserve this? This pain is not a flaw in you. This confusion is not a weakness. It is the shared cry of a human heart when life doesn't seem to make sense. When good people suffer. When kindness doesn't seem to protect anyone. It's a question as old as consciousness, and one that deserves to be honored, not silenced. This talk is not an attempt to cover your wounds with pretty words or quick answers. It's an invitation to sit with the question, gently, honestly. To walk together toward what the Buddha saw, not as a distant deity, but as a fellow human being who looked into the very heart of this suffering and refused to turn away. He didn't offer a promise to remove pain, but he did uncover a way to understand it, deeply enough that it no longer has to break us. Where healing begins, recognizing that pain is real. So where do we begin? Not with lofty ideas or distant ideals, but with the quiet truth that lives in our own chest, the ache we carry, often in silence. This was also where Siddhartha began. For most of his early life, he was protected from the world's harsher realities. But when he finally encountered them, sickness, old age, and death, he was not indifferent. He was shaken, deeply. The very same questions we ask today stirred in him too. Why does life hurt? Why is there so much we cannot hold on to? It was not weakness that made him ask these things. It was clarity. And that clarity became the seed of his search. After his awakening, the first truth he shared was not some abstract philosophy, but a direct recognition of what we all feel: dukkha. While often translated as suffering, the word points to something more nuanced, a kind of underlying tension woven into the fabric of life itself. Like a wheel that doesn't spin quite smoothly, even when the road seems calm. It is the truth that everything we love is fragile, that happiness fades, that even in moments of joy, a quiet uncertainty lingers underneath. This teaching is not pessimism. It is not meant to discourage or darken our view of the world. It is like a doctor naming the illness, not to alarm you, but to help you heal. By naming dukkha, the Buddha was saying, I see it too. I've felt it too. And that simple act of seeing it clearly and saying it aloud is already healing. It tells us, your pain is not a mistake. The feeling that something is not quite settled in life, that too, is part of being human. There is nothing wrong with you for feeling this way. This is where the path truly begins. Not in self-blame, not in denial, but in compassion. A deep and honest compassion for yourself and for the silent ache that connects all living beings. When goodness hurts, understanding karma without blame. Once the Buddha had acknowledged the deep wound of dukkha, he didn't stop there. He didn't tell us to merely accept it and resign ourselves to suffering. Instead, he pointed to a cause we can influence. This brings us to one of the most powerful ideas in his teaching: karma. It's a word we've all heard, but its original meaning is often misunderstood. In a discourse from the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha made a quiet but radical shift. At a time when many people believed that karma meant only physical actions, rituals performed, deeds done, he turned the focus inward. It is intention, sadhana, monks, that I call karma, he said. Having intended, one acts through body, speech, and mind. This is more than semantics. It is a revolution of agency. It means that the moral weight of an action lies not just in what is done, but in the quality of the heart behind it. The seeds of our future are not planted by mere motion, but by meaning, by our willingness to choose kindness, clarity, and care in each moment. This theme appears again in a profound dialogue found in the Majjhima Nikaya. A young man named Subba approached the Buddha with a timeless question. Why is there inequality in the world? Why are some short-lived and others long-lived, some sickly and others healthy, some poor and others wealthy? The Buddha answered directly. Beings are the owners of their karma, the heirs of their karma. Karma is the womb from which they are born. It is karma that separates beings into high and low states. At first, this teaching may sound sharp, especially when our hearts are raw with grief. It can feel like a verdict, as if suffering were a personal fault. But that's not the spirit of what the Buddha was saying. To understand his meaning, we must understand the world he was speaking to. He was challenging ideas that left people powerless. The belief that all things were decided by divine will, or that life was random, or worse, predestined and unchangeable. Against these views, the Buddha's message was radical. You are not powerless. You are not merely at the mercy of fate. The choices you make, especially your intentions, carry real weight. This was not a teaching of blame. It was a teaching of responsibility. And responsibility, when rightly understood, is always a doorway to hope. Because what is shaped can be reshaped. What is built can be rebuilt. And yet, even with this understanding, a painful paradox remains. We look at someone we love, someone who has lived with tenderness and goodwill, and we ask, how could they be the owner of such suffering? The answer is not easy, but it is compassionate. Our personal karma is a powerful stream, but it does not flow through an empty world. It moves through a landscape already filled with other forces: biology, environment, social systems, collective history. The life of our loved one is not a solitary current. It is a meeting place of many rivers. Think of their good intentions as seeds, noble, healthy, planted with love. But seeds grow within conditions. The richness of the soil, the sun and rain, the winds that pass through, all of these shape what blossoms and what doesn't. So we must hold two truths together. Yes, goodness matters. But no, it does not always protect us immediately from the storm. Goodness is not a transaction. It's not a guarantee of smooth outcomes. But it is never wasted. It is a force that strengthens the field of life itself. It makes the soil richer, the roots deeper, the world kinder, even when the weather turns rough. Why suffering feels so unfair? Seeing the web of conditions. At this point in our journey, we find ourselves holding two truths, both powerful and seemingly at odds. On one hand, the Buddha teaches that we have personal agency. Our intentions matter. Our actions shape our path. On the other hand, life keeps reminding us that suffering can strike the kindest people in ways that feel random and undeserved. This tension is not a flaw in the teachings, it is the doorway. It invites us not to choose one truth over the other, but to expand our view until we can hold both. To do that, we must zoom out, gently, courageously. We must begin to see suffering not as a single verdict, but as a storm, one that forms when many forces meet. Like wind, heat, and pressure converging in the sky, pain too is often the result of a complex intersection of conditions. To help us navigate this territory, later Buddhist thinkers offered a map, a way to understand how these forces interact. They called it the 5 niyamas, the 5 natural laws. This isn't a checklist the Buddha recited in one place, but a synthesis drawn from his many teachings. Together, they offer a framework for understanding why things happen the way they do. Here they are. Utu Niyama, the law of the physical world. Climate, chemistry, physics. Bija Niyama, the law of biology. Genetics, cellular processes, organic life. Kamma Niyama, the law of intentional action, volition, and its ethical results. Citta Niyama, the law of mind, how thoughts and emotions arise and unfold. Dhamma Niyama, the law of reality itself, the truth of impermanence, interdependence, and natural order. Let's return to something real. Imagine a good person suddenly facing a serious illness. At first glance, we might want to ask, why them? But now we look more deeply. Perhaps the main contributor is bija niyama, a genetic mutation, a fragile biological thread. But maybe utu niyama plays a role. Pollution, toxins, unseen chemicals in the environment. And then there's kamma niyama, not just personal karma, but collective karma, expressed through a stressed society, unhealthy food systems, or decades of systemic neglect. Now imagine an even more painful example. A child caught in a war zone. Here, utu niyama manifests as raw destruction, bombs, fire, collapse. Kamma niyama appears on a massive scale, the result of generations of greed, hatred, and fear acted out by human communities. The child's own karma may be one small stream, but they have been born into the very eye of the storm. And what about us? Those living ordinary lives with both pain and hope. Our own karma is like the path of a ship. It determines which waters we sail into, but also the strength of the ship itself. Our resilience, our wisdom, our capacity to stay afloat when the waves rise. So let us return to the question that echoes at the heart of suffering. Is the universe unfair? From this wider view, we see something unexpected. The universe is not fair or unfair in the way a courtroom is. There is no judge handing out punishments or rewards. Instead, the universe is lawful. It operates with precision, not preference. A tragedy is not a sentence. It is a confluence, a tragic intersection of many streams of causes and conditions. This understanding will not erase your pain. It isn't meant to, but it can soften the burn of confusion. It can turn "why me?" into a deeper kind of seeing, a quiet clarity that makes room for both sorrow and wisdom. And that clarity, though quiet, is the first ground of hope. Because once we see clearly, we no longer feel cursed. We simply begin to understand. Finding refuge in the present. 2 tools to hold pain wisely. After seeing how vast and complex life truly is, After realizing how many unseen forces shape each moment, it's natural to feel small. You might wonder, what power do I have in the face of all this? The Buddha's answer is both humble and quietly revolutionary. Start here, with your own heart, with your own mind. You may not be able to stop the storms outside, but you can learn to tend the ground beneath your feet. He didn't give us promises to control the universe. He gave us tools to transform how we meet it. And among these tools, two stand out like gentle lanterns in the dark, drawn directly from his teachings. The first is how we relate to the past. In the Salt Crystal Sutta, Lonaphila Sutta, the Buddha offers a simple image. Imagine placing a handful of salt into a small cup of water. The water becomes undrinkable. But if you drop that same amount of salt into a vast river, the river barely changes. It's still clear, still nourishing. The salt is our past mistakes, or the painful consequences of things we cannot undo. The cup is a mind that is tight, reactive, easily overwhelmed. The river is a mind that has been gently widened through kindness, understanding, and the slow practice of forgiveness. We cannot remove every grain of salt from our story, but we can learn to expand the heart that holds it. This is not poetic metaphor. It is practical. When we grow our inner capacity, when we train in patience, compassion, and clarity, we create space around our pain, and in that space, healing begins. The second tool is for meeting pain as it arises. In the Arrow Sutta, Salatha Sutta, the Buddha spoke of two arrows. The first arrow is life itself, a sickness, a loss, a harsh word. It pierces us. We can't always avoid it. This is the natural pain of existence. But then comes the second arrow, one we fire into ourselves. It's the story we build around the pain, the anger, the self-blame, the why me. This second wound, the Buddha said, is optional, and it often hurts more than the first. The practice is not to pretend the first arrow doesn't hurt. It's to meet it with steadiness and care, and to stop ourselves gently from reaching for the second. These two teachings, the salt crystal and the two arrows, lead us to the same truth. The outer world may not always be in our hands, but the inner world can be shaped, moment by moment, breath by breath. We can choose spaciousness over bitterness. We can choose stillness over reaction. We can grow the river. We can drop the second arrow. And in doing so, we begin to reclaim something essential: the power to heal, right here, in the present moment. A steady path forward, living with both heart and wisdom. So with all this understanding, how do we return to our lives? How do we meet pain, our own and that of others, in a way that doesn't leave us bitter, broken, or numb? The Buddha's path forward is not about choosing one truth over another. It's about learning to hold two truths at once. Like seeing with both eyes, like walking with both feet, one grounded in compassion, the other anchored in wisdom. The first is what we might call the view of the heart. This is the human truth, the one that lives in your chest when someone you love is hurting. In those moments, you don't need philosophy. You don't need cosmic explanations. You just need to be present. To sit beside someone in silence. To offer a hand. To say, "I'm here." This truth sees people, not principles. It feels pain not as a puzzle to solve, but as something to hold gently. This is compassion, and it's always the right place to begin. But when the moment has passed, and you find yourself alone with your thoughts, you are allowed to open your second eye, the eye of wisdom. This is the view we've been slowly unfolding throughout this journey. It sees the vast web of causes and conditions. It sees how suffering arises not from punishment or failure, but from the interweaving of natural laws, of impermanence, of karma, of conditions no one person can fully control. This view does not make you cold. It softens you in a different way. It releases you from the burning question, who's to blame? And replaces it with the quieter understanding, this too has causes. It helps you remain steady in the storm, even when you cannot stop the rain. And so we discover that these two ways of seeing are not in conflict. They are complementary, like the wings of a bird. Compassion without wisdom can leave us overwhelmed. Wisdom without compassion can leave us distant. But together, they give us balance. Together, they let us fly. So now, we arrive at the end of this reflection. We began with a very human ache, the heartbreak of watching good people suffer. We saw that the Buddha himself began in that same place, not in certainty, but in questioning. We explored the paradox of goodness and learned that while the world is not always fair, it is always lawful. We looked into the nature of suffering, not to justify it, but to understand it. We discovered tools for healing in the present. And now, we are invited to live with both our heart and our wisdom, fully present, fully awake. In the end, the Buddha's teaching is not a formula to escape pain. It is an embrace, one of understanding and one of empowerment. An embrace that tells you, your pain is real, and you are not alone. And also, within you is the capacity to meet it with clarity, courage, and compassion. So perhaps the question, why them, the one that first broke your heart, can gently evolve into something new. What can I do to ease this pain, even just a little? Because the healing of the world, and the healing of our own hearts, always begins in the same place. One quiet, loving intention at a time.